Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. So the charges against Alec Baldwin have been dismissed with prejudice. Now, if you're not familiar with this, Alec Baldwin was facing charges of involuntary manslaughter with regards to the death of Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust. Now, dismissed with prejudice means that this is over. It's done. Those charges are gone and they cannot be refiled. He is as good as acquitted. Legally speaking, you are innocent until and unless proven guilty, and he cannot be proven guilty, so he is legally innocent. That doesn't mean that you can't make your own judgments about him morally or ethically or any of those things. You can make whatever calls you want to make. But from a legal perspective, he's the same as you or I. Now, a lot of people are saying that he's gotten off on a technicality. So I want to talk a little bit about what happened and a little bit about my thoughts on that particular phrase. So what happened in this case is that there were a number of bullets that were turned over by a Good Samaritan. And the prosecution had some theories about the motives of this Good Samaritan and whether or not they were all that good. But that's kind of aside, except as to why the prosecution did what they did. So, some of these bullets turned out to be a match, visually at least, on a superficial level, with the fatal bullets on the scene of Rust. But these particular bullets had never made it to New Mexico. The issue, of course, is that they were from a batch that might have been the original source of the bullets. So the question is there, how do these bullets make it down to New Mexico? Are they a match? Are these connected into the case in some way? Now, the police and the prosecutor appear to have decided that no, they were not connected. They were, not relevant. But the judge disagreed and found that they were relevant, particularly to the argument of an intervening cause. And in this case, the intervening cause, which means some other cause to the event that sort of breaks the chain of causes that otherwise would connect Alec Baldwin to the killing, might have been a sabotage. And so how can Alec Baldwin have expected sabotage is basically the argument to be made. So was the set sabotaged? Now, I think that this is a stupid theory. I don't think it was sabotage. I don't think that that makes sense. But the defense is entitled to explore it. And maybe if they'd been able to explore it, maybe it turns out it's not a stupid theory. Maybe that could have been a viable theory. The issue is that we don't know and we can't know because these things were not investigated and because the defense was never given the opportunity to investigate this because this evidence was not turned over to them. Turning over potentially significant evidence is required under Brady. Now, in Canada, we have a similar rule, Stinchcombe. And where that has been violated, the remedy may well be to throw the case out. Here, that's what the court ultimately found, was that the only remedy here, because the jury had already been impaneled, was to throw the case out. So, the judge certainly found that this was a significant violation. And frankly, I agree with the judge. I don't like the result. I personally think Baldwin holds some responsibility, and I would have liked to see that go to a jury to decide whether he was criminally culpable. But the problem is that when we get these violations, the law requires a remedy. And people say that this is getting off on a technicality. And that is a phrase I absolutely hate. Because whenever people say that somebody got off on a technicality, it always comes down to one of a few different things. Number one, the police screwed up. Number two, the prosecutor screwed up. Now, it could be more than one of these things. Number three, the Constitution, the rights people are granted under it, was violated in some fashion. So people broke the law. And number four is just the simple one of they didn't prove it. And you can see how these are all often interrelated in that often you'll get things like the police screwed up by violating the Constitution, and that means that the case couldn't be proven. Or just the police screwed up by failing to collect some critical evidence, so the case couldn't be proven. These kinds of things tend to go together. But these aren't like technicalities in the sense of being trivialities. People say, oh, they got off on a technicality to imply that it was some sort of trivial nonsense that got somebody cleared of charges. And that's not true. It's not trivial nonsense. The Constitution is not a technicality. It is the fundamental basis for fair trials. And that's not sort of a triviality. It's not, it matters. The Constitution matters. Fair trials matter. And if you were charged, these things would matter to you. Everybody talks about these things as if it's some sort of ridiculous thing that people are getting off on a technicality, but you wouldn't feel that way if it was you. Now, let's consider sort of part of the issue here, and that's part of the issue is that the prosecutor decided that it wasn't relevant here, and it can be really dangerous for a prosecutor to decide that a bit of disclosure is not relevant. Let's consider an example. You have been accused, you personally, think of you personally in these shoes, have been accused of killing somebody at a highway rest stop. You know, one of the little places where you can pull over to go to the bathroom, have a nap, throw out garbage, those kinds of things. And you say, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. I stopped at that rest stop, but I was gone. I just wasn't there. It wasn't me. Now, the police, when they do an investigation of the scene, they find a few cigarette butts as well as an empty cigarette pack. And there are some fingerprints on that, and there's DNA on these cigarettes. And they're able to track that package of cigarettes based on the, based on the barcode. They track it back to a gas station. And they determine that that package of cigarettes was purchased a month ago, a month prior to the murder. And so they decide, listen, this is irrelevant. They run the guy's name. They figure out who it is. They say, this guy's got no criminal record. So really, this is irrelevant. And they decide not to turn that over to you. Okay, well, so far you might say, okay, that sounds reasonable. But let's add some potential facts here. Let's say there's some indication that this guy lives in one place and works in another place, and this rest stop is out of the way, and there's really no reason for him to ever go on that route. Okay, that's not telling us a whole lot. But let's say there's also evidence that could have been dug up if it was researched, that he'd been going there just to that specific rest stop every few days leading up to the killing, but never before that. So about a month prior, he starts going out there and just hanging out. And after the killing, he stops going there. Now, this is starting to sound like a different case, right? This is starting to sound like maybe this guy was going out there and staking out a spot. Maybe he had planned this out as a murder spot. And the thing is, we don't know, right? And the only way to know is to get all of that information and to start digging, start looking into it. Maybe this guy has nothing to do with it. Maybe he was going out there because he's meeting a mistress and he's got a perfectly good excuse to be there. Cool. But the defense needs to be able to explore that and to investigate this, because maybe he's the real killer, and maybe you're facing charges for something he did. And if the prosecution decides that that cigarette butt and that cigarette package are irrelevant and they're not going to turn that over, you never get to know who this person is. You never get to think about this. And so it's absolutely critical that if that evidence was potentially significant enough that it led the police to do an investigation into it, to run the guy's name, to track down all of these things, to check his DNA, to check his criminal record, then it's maybe significant to you too. And in this case, the police did a whole bunch of investigation with regards to this ammunition, and that led them to say, well, we don't think it's a big deal. Well, the defense was entitled to do their own investigation. I hate the language of technicalities. Almost always, when you get a technicality that involves a violation of somebody's constitutional rights, it means that the police broke the law. And we only ever use this language when somebody is acquitted, We don't use this language when somebody's convicted. And that really shows that as a society, we have a strong bias towards assuming people are guilty and towards conviction. We always, and Baldwin never went to a jury. It is entirely possible that a jury would have convicted him had it been put to him. It's also entirely possible that a jury would have acquitted him. And I think it's actually more likely than not that the jury would have acquitted him rather than convicted him. Although ultimately, we'll never know. We won't get to see all of the evidence. And I know that's frustrating, but that is sort of where things are. But we never talk about people being convicted on a technicality. We never talk about that, even though we may be dealing with less significant things. We might say, oh, this confession was thrown out because the police beat the guy, like physically laid hands on him, and so the confession couldn't be used. And we may say, oh, it was tossed out on a technicality. Well, that technicality is a physical assault, like a real crime. Whereas if I steal a candy bar, if I steal a pen, and I get sent to jail over it, maybe not for a long time, but if I get sent to jail for stealing a single solitary pen worth less than $1, people don't say that I was convicted and sent to jail on a technicality, even though I think it's less serious that somebody steals a pen than that a police officer punches someone in the face in order to get a confession. Of those two things, I think the punching is the more significant one. So I just encourage everyone out there to rethink how they talk about these things and how they think about them. Is it really a technicality, or is it a fundamental principle of fair trials and human liberty? Which is it? Because I think it's the second one. I don't like the technicality language. It is a peeve of mine. So Baldwin was acquitted, or his charges were dismissed, because people broke the law and violated his fundamental rights. I don't like the guy. I don't like, I don't care about his politics. I don't care about, what characters he's played. I don't care about anything. I do care that he was certainly, he shot and killed somebody. And he seems very cavalier to me about the whole thing. I don't like that. But at the end of the day, the acquittal, even of a guy I have been saying did, I've not been uncritical of Baldwin, but his acquittal was just and proper. Anyway, I'm sure there's going to be some people with thoughts in the comments. I'm sure I'm going to see that subscriber number go down, but that is the nature of standing up for fundamental rights. Nobody likes defense lawyers because sometimes we have opinions like this, but we are important. And I will say, if it was you in his seat, you would want the same rights he's getting. The only real tragedy is that most of us cannot afford the legal team he had, who was able to successfully argue this and to get him the remedy for the violation of his rights. A lot of people don't have those resources. That, to me, is the unfortunate thing in this. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you found this to be interesting or educational. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level. Purple Dragonair, Cielo, CCFR, PJs Forever, Canada's National Firearms Association, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, as well as at the $20 level, Lindsay Metcalf, Larry Kalniak, Kyle Fox, Drunk All of the Baileys, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, Vicky, and Dorky Dane. Thank you as well to my $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. Hope this armed you with knowledge. See you next time.